Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this presentation with Careium. So with us today, we have the CEO, Christian Wallén. So please go ahead with your presentation, and we'll follow up with some Q&A.
Thank you, Oscar, and thank you for having me at ABG. We've been collaborating for a couple of years, and we've been very happy with the collaboration thus far. Hope to continue. And also fantastic to get to meet all of you to present our fantastic company for you all. And as Oscar mentioned, my name is Christian Wallén, and I have the great pleasure of serving as the CEO for Careium, which is absolutely fantastic. And before I dive into our business and our company, I'd like us to spend a little bit of time to think about the most powerful, yet most subtle revolution that is currently ongoing. And it's not the climate. It's not changing geopolitics, because those are very loud. It's the fact that all of us and all the people around us in Western society are getting older. It is completely inevitable, and it will happen to all of us and our parents. Quite a lot of young people in the audience here today. But what's so important about this change is the fact that it will fundamentally transform what Western society looks like. And why is that? Well, come 2060, we'll have 1/3 of the entire Western population above the age of 65. Now, you can be super healthy, able to do everything you'd like at the age of 65, certainly. But this is going to fundamentally change how we arrange our societies, our physical environments, how people vote, because we can see strong correlations between changes in political orientation across the ages. And we will have the issue of how on earth we are going to ensure that we can care for all these people. And it's easy to think that maybe in Southern Europe and other countries, this is a family affair where we have closer ties to our relatives and that we're very strangely isolated here in the north. But that is not the case. Already last year, around 1/3 of all people in Europe over 65, they were living alone. And there is a massive cost to society in caring for people at older age, seeing as long as they are able to stay within the confines of their home, the costs for care are at an acceptable level. But with these accelerating numbers, and just in the Swedish example, we know that the cost to care for a single individual increases by a factor of 4 if they go into residential care, and by 8 if we are forced to provide for them in more of a hospital-like setting. So this is what Careium is all about. It is about being a solution to what is this major challenge facing all of us, but it's moving so slowly that we barely registered it. And how are we doing this? Well, our vision is very, very clear. We want to enable millions of seniors to live really rich, safe, and fulfilling lives. And we want to do that by really innovative hardware, IoT solutions, sensors, and so on, that we can connect around the individual in a way that makes us more understanding of the situation, able to put the right efforts in if there is a need for support. Because you need the hardware. In this very digital era, we've forgotten that as we talk about data, we need to get the data from somewhere. And in this context, it comes from hardware. It's not on your phone. It's in your home and on you. Second, we work with leading software. This is everything from end-to-end cloud platforms for the management of sensor signals to involving the relatives to create a wider care circle around an individual. And last but not least, depending on what market we are in, we are also providing services ranging from manual labor and installation, operators in alarm centers, to emergency response personnel when we are contracted to provide that. So this is what Careium is all about, and our future vision is to serve as the nexus for connecting everything an individual needs, tailored to him or her, to be able to lead as a fulfilling life as possible. And that we can do with technology, smart data, and great services. This is what Careium is all about. And if we take a look at our industry, so to speak, somewhat affectionately called silver tech or age tech or care tech, or as we like to say, technology-enabled care. It is actually an industry that is growing in a very healthy manner, around 8% CAGR if we look somewhat to the future. And this, of course, has a number of really strong market drivers. The most prominent one is, of course, the changing demographics. But aside from that, there is also a really low level of penetration for these type of solutions and services for seniors in Europe. If we look at the powerhouse of Europe, Germany, we see that in the group of 65 plus, around 5.6% are currently using some type of solution of this nature. You contrast that to the UK, where that number rises to 16%. So we see tons of adoption yet to happen that has not manifested yet. In addition to that, you can always build so many new services around each and every installation and sort of customer endpoint. And the fact that a lot of the technology that's out there right now, in the UK, maybe around 60% of everything that is servicing people right now, it is on older legacy infrastructure, even analog wired networks that are continuously being switched out. Every country in Europe is gradually phasing out old connectivity and infrastructure. Sweden does away with 2G and 3G in this and the next year. Norway follows suit, same time frame, and that calls for new innovative products. If we look at the penetration levels in the markets across Europe, we can see that there are actually quite a few countries that have more of substantial, around 10% plus kind of adoption rate for these solutions. And many of the large countries, the Spains, the Frances, and the Germanys, they are actually around 5%, which is, of course, a really, really great opportunity for us. What's also very interesting is that the whole industry is actually segmented across services, hardware, software. There's plenty of areas to play in, and we are very fortunate to be playing in all of them as one of the 3 companies in Europe doing this. In addition, this is not just a sort of business to the public. It is in Sweden, certainly, Norway also, but in other markets, this is a B2B or even a B2C game. And we're also quite fortunate to be able to play across those dimensions. And if we look at the business, we were spun off from Doro, which was our original home in December 2021. For those that have followed us, you would probably say, well, it doesn't seem to have been such a great decision to do so. We'll get to the share price in a bit. But all in all, we are now a fairly stable and healthy company, a headcount of around 850 people. We've been growing, including acquisitions, quite healthily over the years. And we ended 2023 with around 824 million in revenue. Steadily improving margins and a fairly consistent split across the markets we are in. As you can see, if you remember the former map here, we are actually with physical presence and commercial operations, where 85% of the spend within technology-enabled care in Europe is basically being allotted. So we don't really see the need to establish ourselves in Greece or the Czech Republic, but we'd rather stay very well where we are. Around 70% of our revenues come from a subscription kind of model, and the remaining 30% consists of direct sales of products. And this is, of course, our technology that we put in the hands of someone else to operate and use to service an end user, so to speak. And if you dive in a little bit further, the interesting part, I think, here is that across these 3 categories of offering, we deliver it in quite different format based on the market dynamic. And this is one of the reasons for why we might have great competitors in one market where we go head to head and learn from one another. Very, very few have actually managed to establish themselves in multiple markets across Europe, which we have. And the main reason for that is probably because all markets are very different. Some of them, like Sweden and Norway, they are pure play business to government, whereas others, such as Germany, it's just straight up B2B. And then you will also have your United Kingdoms, which are effectively all of these different segments at once. And all of them are healthy and growing, and you could potentially just compete in one of them and do really well. We have opted, with our size, being the third largest company in our industry in Europe, to go for all of them and to be really smart about how we enable our solutions to be functional, valuable, and relevant across all of this at the same time. Of course, it's a bit hard, but we seem to be doing okay. And given that we have a lot of analysts and financially skilled people here in the room, those that have been following us have probably noticed that we've had a steady upward trend, moving towards greater levels of stability across both revenue, our profitability, and also, to some extent, our cash flow. For those that have really dug into the business, you probably realize that if there's one challenge to our overall business model, it is the cash flow, but that is mainly a factor derived from doing business in the Nordics, because here we have sort of rental agreements for the subscription of services, and that means that if you do really, really well, your cash isn't so great for that year. Over time, it comes back to you, and it's a pretty good deal in the end. Our share, for those that have been following us, from our IPO in 10th of December 2021, I personally think it's almost a bit funny that the share price more or less reflects whatever it is we have done in the company. I don't know how it happened, but you can quite clearly see that we were on a downward slope following the IPO, because we were forced to deal with what it meant to be, you know, our own separate listed company. We had previously been a part of Doro, and thus we saw this major decline here. Over time, we have done all the right things in terms of getting commercial excellence and operational excellence in place. We have centralized a lot of the things that were decentralized and fragmented and thus very costly. And we're very, very happy to see that we are now almost back to the same share price where we listed and market cap also, whilst First North, on which we are listed, has dove sort of 46% or something like that. And these are figures from Friday, so I don't know if we're down 1% or something just for today. And throughout this, we've had really, really great owners who've been backing us. Sidro Förvaltning, the family office of Peter Lindell, who was part of founding Right Management, is our largest shareholder, followed by Accendo Capital, which is a Finnish activist fund. And third on the list is Nordea Funds. And if we look to the future, we see that we are now in a position where we are the company that we were meant to be following the split. Now it is time to become the company we were supposed to be. And to do so, we are going to focus a lot more on these major growth markets in Europe. For those that followed our Q1 report, you could see that our other markets, which is Germany and France and Switzerland and so on, it grew 80% compared to the prior year. And we're going to make sure that we are as successful there as we've been in the Nordics and in other areas. Second, and what I'm really proud of as we've done this turnaround, is that we've retained our investments and focus on R&D. So we come out of this period stronger than we've ever been, and we have tons of new interesting digital and hardware-related solutions. We just released our mobile social alarm, a small little unit that you always keep with you, which is packed with features with everything from geofencing to GPS tracking, two-way communication, and so on, which has been our fastest-selling product that we've ever released since it came out in December. So a lot more focus on the business-to-consumer market with products like this, and a lot more of offering our customers bundled solutions with our hardware and our end-to-end cloud software integrated in a smarter package. This is something that no other provider in our industry does really well, so we truly believe we have an edge there. And last but not least, for those that are looking, you realize that if you look at the metrics on how we're doing in relation to debt, we are actually down to quite low ratios. So one of the founding ideas of Careium was that this is a very fragmented market where you could basically build a very strong company with a lot of acquisition activity. And we are looking forward to go back to that agenda. And we think that it should be done in a very hard manner, which means that if we buy companies that basically do the same thing, we really integrate them for efficiency rather than allow them to be sort of freely managed, as has been the history in Careium, or rather in the Doro days. So for those thinking about investments into Careium, I think we were, in 2023, we were on one of the 10 best performing stocks on First North. I think so, at least. I think there are many reasons for why we're an interesting case. First of all, we have a really, really good market to work with. Most of it is not done yet, so to speak. Germany is sitting at 5.6% penetration in the 65-plus age bracket. That's really interesting. What happens if they reach UK levels of 16%? Second is that we're a really, really strong position within this market. I'd argue that we are probably the most innovative, larger-scale player and really appreciated for our quality, which is something, given the criticality of our services, that our customers really appreciate. It's also very, very good to be a Nordic company because you do business in a Nordic way, which is very, very appreciated when your main competitors have other business cultures. Third, we have around 70% in a recurring revenue model, which is, of course, very good if you are able to fund yourself from the bank and so on, and you can sort of predict that you have stable revenue coming in. With also having a lot of public counterparties, it's also very, very safe to take on a little bit of risk. So in that regard, this is another strength of our model. And last but not least, we are solving a societal problem. And we are doing so very, very well. And thus, an investment into Careium is also an investment into creating a better future for millions of people and also ticking off a couple of the global sustainability goals. So with that, Oskar, I thought I'd leave it to you. And I've asked Oskar specifically not to tell me the questions beforehand, because then it gets a bit better.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So just I thought I'd start with going a little bit into the background. As you mentioned, you had, well, a pretty low profitability. You had a very big pressure on margins and cash flows where you had leverage increasing so much that you broke your covenants. Sure. And then you've had a very impressive turnaround. So, but just going back, what makes you sure about, or how do you comfort investors that you are not going to see a similar case like we did in 2022?
Yeah. No, that's a very good question. I think that then you need to go back a little bit to why this situation emerged. So what was done in the Doro days was that you all know Doro phones for seniors, really smart technology, really challenged, of course, by the iPhone and all those other great innovations. So at Doro, around 15 years ago, someone was smart and said, we're not going to have our future in phones. We need to find some other way of being relevant for our target group. So they decided on a broader scope on technology-enabled care. And what was done in the Doro days was that basically, there are many serial acquirers like the Storskogens and whatnots out there, but they did around 15 acquisitions to create this new business area, most of them really small. And that is what was known as Care within Doro, later becoming Careium. The problem here was that if you know your M&A, you know that a lot of the value comes from the integration, and there was absolutely nothing of that sort done. So when I came in, we had a situation where we had 5 legal entities in the UK that had not been rolled together. You had to have PwC come in and audit them and charge exorbitant fees for each and every entity. So there were a lot of costs related to just not putting things together. You have to run tons of payroll people just to cope with different schemes and so on. So a lot of what we did was about trying to, in a very, very short time, solve for that legacy. Getting the companies together, centralizing things, doing away with a lot of costly systems and putting everyone on the same sort of ERP plate, if you know what that is, the same systems for everything from financial control to stock management to what have you, to basically have a unified IT environment. This obviously opened up to quite a lot of redundancies because we did not need to double work things in a very high degree, and thus we could be a lot more efficient on the personnel side, predominantly in the UK, where I think the majority of the issues actually were. So we haven't done anything that I would classify as rocket science in terms of getting back on our feet. We've just done the things that sort of you have to do. What is impressive is that we've done them in a very fast time span. But that, I think, is not something that worries us in terms of looking towards the future. We feel pretty happy with where we've come thus far. And we do think that there's a lot more we can do that is a little bit more advanced rather than these basics that we've been occupying ourselves with good results. So I do not foresee any sort of issues in terms of going back to those kind of dire straits. What I do see is that I'd rather amp up some of the investments that we are doing, because I think we have a fantastic sort of runway ahead of us where we're in a very, very good position to capitalize on that.
Perfect. Are you just talking about growth then, which we hope can come from the investment? So you are alluding to around 8% market growth, and you're targeting 12 to 15% organic growth this year. So how do you feel about the competitive environment, and what makes you be able to outgrow the market in this way?
Well, the main reason for why we guide at 12 to 15% is that there are so many infrastructure changes going on right now. Sweden, Norway doing away with 2G and 3G. That means that you need to change a lot of equipment, which obviously drives a lot of sales for us. Same story in the UK, where they used to have the 31st of December as the date where they were to pull the plug on all analog networks, which 60% of the installed base runs on them. So they've now since postponed that a little bit and added a few more years to it. But we do see that it will be a very, very hot market in the product category. And our Q1 came in at 9.6, which I think in terms of growth, or 9.8, I can't even remember, which the market clearly appreciated, but we weren't so happy because we truly think that this can be a really, really strong year. However, we're not going to throw in any towels and say that we're not going to have to change the guidance, because we do believe that this is happening. Then if it's happening this year or next year, we hope to be doing pretty well. So over time, I think it's maybe more reasonable, aside from acquisitions, just pure play organic, that beating the market and adding some, it's a quite reasonable target for a quality premium player, but these years will probably be quite strong. And the question then is, with the UK out of the way, with the Nordics out of the way, then you have a new timeline for France, which is set to 2030. You have Germany set for a similar time frame. So the question is whether this will keep rolling across the EU for a couple of or more years to come. Who knows?
Perfect. And just one last question. You talked about the very impressive margin recovery, and that has stabilized, obviously, and improving cash flow. So the leverage has come down pretty sharply. And also now with the stability and the fragmented market that you are talking about, at least I think that there should be a game of scale here in the market where consolidation can benefit a lot. So are you feeling comfortable now with the leverage situation? Are you actively targeting new M&A opportunities?
Well, I think you're right in the sense that we are in a very healthy space, perhaps too healthy, and we should probably take on more risk, if you will. But the founding hypothesis of Careium was to say, well, this is a super fragmented market. It should be some really good opportunities to get some of the best companies and get some scale efficiencies. That is still true. We do not see a situation where a PE-backed or similar entity has sort of scooped all the good ones up. Far from it. So we are very much hoping to get back on to that part of our strategy. And as I highlighted also, this is something where we feel that we do not need to buy super expensive, super smart technology companies. We can do that ourselves. But what we want to buy is more really well-regarded, well-performing service providers that we can make even better. So a bit boring, but I think it will feed itself in a very healthy way, setting up a good future.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. I think that concludes this session.
Do you have any questions?